Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Good afternoon. I am Dr. Faith B.Yisrael, and I am here doing a very quick session with you this afternoon about the Cuban vaccines that we all seem to be loving. Even before we know much about them, we all seem to be in love with these Cuban vaccines. So, as I said, many of you know me. I am Dr. Faith B.Yisrael. I am a politician. I am a behavioral health scientist. My bachelor's degree is in neuroscience. My master's and the doctoral degrees are in behavioral and community health sciences in public health. I went to the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health, and so this is what I went to school to do, to talk about these issues relating to public health. This afternoon, I just want to spend a little bit of time chatting about the COVID-19 vaccines, particularly the vaccines that are coming in from Cuba, because they seem to be the new kids on the block. They seem to be the ones that everybody is now excited about. I am also excited about these Cuban vaccines, so we want to talk a little bit about them. So before we start, I want to just let you know, I'm seeing a couple of you on the live. Are you all hearing me okay? If you're hearing me okay, just say, hey, yes, we're hearing you. Just type in the chat, yes, we're hearing you, so that I know that I'm coming through okay, because I'm not using my headset. Normally I have a headset that I have connected to the laptop, but I'm not using that today. I'm doing it a little bit differently today. So I just want to make sure I'm coming through fine. Also, if you think that this is going to be useful to other people who are around, other people who might be interested in learning about these Cuban vaccines, other people who might be interested in learning about vaccines generally, please consider sharing this live. Thank you so much. I'm seeing so many of you jumping in. Thanks so much. Thank you, loud and clear. Thank you so much, Kilel. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks, Miss Shirley. Cindy Hackett, thank you. Yes, you're hearing loud and clear. Bernie, thank you all so much. Lance Ogini, sweet and clear. You're so sweet. Thank you, Mr. Ogis. How are you all? So yes, again, because this is a hot topic, because this is something that I know we all want to talk about, please, 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 is every one of you who are on this live, please share the live. You could either share it privately or share it publicly so that other people could be a part of this discussion. That would be great. Let me just take 1 second to also share it in another group that I am in that I completely forgot to share it into. I know these people would be very, very interested in having this information. Now, before I start that, though, I just want to say, I am actually a little late this afternoon because I was just in a virtual and online kata competition that just happened right here in Tobago. Yes, if you're into martial arts, the Tobago Martial Arts Academy they're still having it. I had to jump out just because I knew I had promised to do this at 2 and I didn't want to be too late. They are having their virtual first ever online kata competition. So I just spent the last hour or so looking at these young people doing their kata virtually. So they're all in their homes, in their backyards, in different places. They call their name in their category. They used, I think, Google Meet is what they used. And then the kids just came on and did their kata. They were judges. And, with this new thing with COVID-19 that allows us to be all over the world, but experiencing the same thing, there were judges from the United States, judges in Tobago, judges in other places, scoring these young people doing their kata. And I thought that was just amazing. That was just wonderful. So that's why I'm a little late. Please forgive me. I know I had promised to come on at 2 to do this. I know I promised to come on at 2, but I couldn't pull myself away from them. This is amazing. It's the Tobago Martial Arts Academy. I took a couple little snippets. I think I would share these snippets with people when I'm done here. So anyway, one of the things, so I just wanted to chat really quickly. I'm not going to be here very long because my brother, Assemblyman Farley, is scheduled to be on another program shortly. So I'm going to be wrapping up here so that I can tune in and listen to him talk about the Tobago Autonomy Bill and that kind of stuff. So anyway, we're here to talk about the COVID-19 vaccines and the fact that there are COVID-19 vaccines coming out of Cuba. And I made a post this morning because I've been seeing so many people talking about the fact that they are going to take the Cuban vaccines. And I'm like, hold up. And these are the same people who have been begging for the longest while to take vaccines, and they've been telling me they're not taking any vaccine, and suddenly these Cuban vaccines come on the scene. And suddenly everybody ready to take these Cuban vaccines. And it's amazing because it's important because there are people who are very ready and willing to take the Cuban vaccines because of the history that Cuba has. And I really, really term the post how brand recognition is important because we are used to Cuba saving us when it comes to medicine. We are used to even our top politicians leaving Trinidad and Tobago, going to Cuba to get medical care. We are used to that. We are used to Cuban doctors and nurses flying all over the world to help out. Even here in Trinidad and Tobago, when we just started with COVID-19, with the response, we had Cuban nurses come in and so forth to be a part of it. So I think that's all when I say brand recognition. I didn't necessarily mean a particular company, but I really meant we really like Cuba. We trust. I think that is the better word. We trust Cuban medicine. So we would trust medical things, medical procedures, medicines that come out of Cuba. And that's fine. That is just the way we think. It's also, I have even said that, even though Cuba may not be, the vaccines that come out of Cuba may not be WHO approved, they may not be WHO approved because, Cuba may not approach WHO for the WHO to review their vaccines. It would actually be one of the vaccines that I would say, well, even if it's not WHO approved, because we trust Cuba so much, we are willing to say, yes, let's take these Cuban vaccines. But I wanted to spend a little time letting you know a couple of things. One, there are actually 5 Cuban vaccines as it relates to COVID-19. Let me just explain something, and you would see me looking down a little bit because I'm using a different setup where I'm using my camera right there, but I'm using my laptop, which is just a little bit down. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading on my laptop. Please forgive me. I always when I know things, I know things. And when I don't know, I am very willing to say there are many things I don't know. And so far, it is what it is. So just to let you know, there are 5, I don't know what the second hand was for. There are 5 main categories or broad categories of COVID-19 vaccines. So there are 5 broad categories of COVID-19 vaccines globally. These were developed globally. And I'm going to read through the list. We have what are known as viral vector vaccines, and they are unrelated, where they use unrelated or harmless virus modified to deliver the SARS-CoV-2 genetic material. So, for example, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, that is using a viral vector where they use another kind of virus, not the COVID-19 virus. They use another kind of virus, a virus that does not affect us, that does not harm us. They put the genetic material so that we know it's the SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. So they put that information in a virus that we know does not harm us, and that is what they use for that vaccine. So that's just known as a viral vector vaccine. And the Oxford AstraZeneca, which is the vaccines we had first, the first set of vaccines that came into Trinidad and Tobago, they use that technology. The Sputnik, which is also the Russian vaccine, also uses that technology. We saw that there was a big spat between what was it, Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. I think it was because Guyana was using the Sputnik vaccine from Russia, even though it was not WHO approved, for very much the same reasons, I guess, as we may use the Cuban vaccines eventually. So that's the viral vector vaccines. And these are, again, Oxford AstraZeneca and Sputnik. This is where you have a virus that does not harm the body. Because, we have viruses and bacteria and all kind of stuff running around that doesn't do us harm. We put the information about the COVID-19 virus inside of it and put that inside of us. That's the vaccine I got. I got my first shot of AstraZeneca, and I'm waiting for the 8 to 12 weeks to go around to get my second shot. The second kind of vaccine is what is known as the mRNA vaccines, the messenger ribonucleic acid vaccines. And these are the new kids on the block. And when I say new kids on the block, I mean in terms of technology. This is the newest of the technologies. And this is where we are using the protein, which is the spike protein, that is on the virus. We are pulling that information and basically putting that inside of you, so that your body then recognizes the spike protein, which is really what it looks for when it sees the virus, to make antibodies. What vaccines use this technology? Pfizer and Moderna. These are the 2 American new kids on the block. Everybody talking about they want the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine is the vaccines that came from wherever they came from. And we accidentally knew about them coming into Trinidad and Tobago. And there are all of these, thoughts about who getting those vaccines and who didn't get those vaccines and so forth. Hey, I am not here today for the bacchanal. I'm just giving you the information. So yeah, those are the mRNA. So that's the Pfizer and the Moderna. Those are the new kids on the block. That is the newest technology. Everything else that I'm going to talk about, so the other 4 technologies that are used for vaccines, have been used forever and ever and ever. And when I say ever and ever, I mean the reason you don't have to worry about polio, the reason you don't have to worry about measles, the reason we don't have to worry about whooping cough, the reason we don't have to worry about hip, the reason we don't have to worry about all of these diseases that we have immunized our children, our babies against. When you take them to clinic, 3 months, 6 months, and the doctors and the nurse give them the injection and they write up the immunization card. Yeah, that is what you were giving your children. Vaccines, all of those. Yeah. So we are used to vaccines. we are used to vaccines. So again, we have the viral vector vaccines, which is what the AstraZeneca and Sputnik are. We have the mRNA vaccines, which is what the Pfizer and the Moderna are. Then we have what is known as an inactivated vaccines containing deactivated SARS-CoV-2 virus. What does that mean? We have a vaccine that we have actually killed the SARS-CoV-2 virus, so that we are putting the virus in you, but we've actually killed it in terms of, they use a chemical to make sure that it can't cause you harm, but the body can still recognize that this virus is inside of you. And that is what the Sinopharm is using. That is what the Sinopharm. China also has what is known as Sinovac. We do not have Sinovac in Trinidad and Tobago, I don't think, but we have the Sinopharm vaccine. So that is what that uses. It is using the SARS-CoV-2, which is the coronavirus virus, but it is killing it first and then putting basically the inactivated, meaning it cannot cause you harm virus inside of you, so that your body can respond to it and create the antibodies that are necessary. Okay, so that's a third category. Then we have what is known as the attenuated vaccines, which give you weakened SARS-CoV-2 virus. And I don't think we have those. Those are the Codagenics. I am not sure. I'm not even sure which company makes Codagenics, but we don't have those in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's the attenuated vaccines containing weakened SARS-CoV-2. And the last category of vaccines is what is known as the protein vaccines. And these are vaccines that contain the COVID-derived protein. So the proteins that are on the SARS-CoV-2, they're really finding those proteins, identifying those proteins, and then putting those proteins in other things. It could be, yeast, it could be other things that they're putting those proteins in and putting that inside of us. So again, the whole point of all of this is that what we want to do, what vaccines do, is enable your body to develop a response against COVID-19 before you actually get COVID-19. That is what vaccines do. It's important for you to remember that that is what vaccines are doing. We ensure that you get a response to COVID-19, ensure that you are able to start making the antibodies, to ensure that you are able to start having your body go through the immune response that is necessary to fight off the COVID-19 before you actually come in contact with it. Because as everyone knows, many of us would come into contact with COVID-19, and then your body takes a little bit of time to mount a response. It's not an instantaneous thing. You don't get the virus today, and by tomorrow you have antibodies to the virus. That's not how it works. If that's how it worked, we wouldn't have a problem. But because it takes a while for our bodies to identify the virus, for our bodies to say, oh yes, that is something that I need to be worried about. Let me go and figure out what it is. And then after I figured out what it is, let me go and then start mounting a response against it. That takes a little bit of time. And that is why many of us, would be fine if we get COVID-19. But some of us, particularly those of us who have other problems, our health is already compromised. We already have high blood pressure. We already have diabetes. We already have cancer. We already have whatever else is the disease that our body is already trying to fight against. When we have those other kinds of diseases, our body isn't able to respond as quickly and as effectively. And in those situations, we end up getting symptoms and we end up getting very, very sick. So instead of waiting to allow your body to go through that response, which in essence is what natural immunity is, when you allow your body to get the virus and to develop those antibodies on its own, because so many of us have comorbidities, because so many of us have so many other diseases that put us at really, really high risk. It is better for all of us to get a vaccine, whatever vaccine it is, so that our bodies can start the process of of fighting, of learning about the virus and fighting against it even before we come into contact with SARS-CoV-2. So that when we do come into contact with it, our bodies already say, hey, I know you. I already made my army against you. So let me start fighting from day one. From day one, let me start fighting, which means it can prevent you from actually getting COVID-19. But even if you are one of those people who get what is known as breakthrough infection, meaning you still get COVID-19, you still get infected because your body has mounted this response already. It means it is able to fight and fight and fight against it. And what they've recognized is that people who already have the vaccine, even if they get COVID-19, they have very minimal symptoms. Many of them are asymptomatic. They don't even know that they have symptoms. Hi, Pearl. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can a person, and I'm hearing seeing Ricardo's ask, can a person be tested for COVID-19 antibodies? Yes, they are actually tests that you can do to see how much how much antibodies you already have. And that is actually one of the tests that they were using to see um, whether you've had COVID-19, because once you've had COVID-19 or once you've had the vaccine, you would have antibodies. So there are tests to see whether you have antibodies or not. I don't know that we have any of those tests in Trinidad and Tobago right now, but there are tests like that in other parts of the world, in real countries. Anyway, when I made the post today, and I want to jump into this quickly before I talk specifically about the Cuban vaccines. Let me read this question. Natalie is saying, can a person still take the vaccine if they had a history of deep vein thrombosis, DVTs? You should be able to, but if you specifically have an issue like that you need to be specifically concerned about, it's important for you to specifically go and talk to your doctor, because you may be saying DVTs, but there may be other issues that your doctor knows about that you need to be concerned about. So when you have specific issues like that, I would recommend that you speak with your physician before deciding to take the vaccine. So it's not an overall, one and done, everybody should take it just because. No. There are certain categories of people that the doctors will tell you. For example, if you have an allergic reaction to some of the things inside of the vaccine, then you shouldn't take that particular vaccine. So you may have an allergy. So for example, one of the vaccines, I think the Cuban vaccines, uses a kind of yeast to deliver the vaccines to you. If you're allergic to yeast, you should not take that vaccine because you're allergic to yeast. So, and then you have a situation where you get an allergic reaction, and then it's like, oh my God, the vaccine kill you. No, it's not that vaccines are horrible and they kill you. You just had an allergic reaction to a particular thing in that particular vaccine, which is one of the reasons it's so important to learn that there are different kinds of vaccines and they use different methodologies, so you can pick the one that is best for you depending on your specific situation. One of the things that somebody asked about on my post this morning was about the efficacy of the vaccines, because one of the things that we hear people talking about is that the Moderna and the Pfizer have 90-something% efficacy, which is really, really good. And the Sinopharm only have a 60-something or 70% efficacy, which is not so good, blah, 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 blah. What I'm going to do now, because I think it is actually this video that I found, as a matter of fact, I didn't find it. Somebody actually posted it on my in a comment under my post today, and I want to thank that person. I can't remember who it is. Whoever you are, thank you so much for posting this video. It's an amazing video. I am going to let it play so that we all hear what the video says. It's a YouTube video, so you can find it on YouTube, but I'm going to put it up. Let me just answer Ricardo's question quickly. Ricardo said, suppose a person got COVID-19 and they didn't know that they didn't know. Wouldn't it be putting themselves at risk to get vaccinated? So the thing about if you already have COVID-19 and you have to be vaccinated, this is what the recommendation is. One, we do not have enough tests to test everybody before we vaccinate you. We just don't have enough tests in Trinidad and Tobago to do that. So that's not a practical thing. Excuse me. So we don't have enough tests. If you have COVID-19 and you have symptoms, then it is recommended that you do not take the vaccine, because remember, when you take the vaccine forces your body to mimic as if you were sick. So when you take the vaccines, for some people, you actually get a response as if you have COVID-19. You get the headaches, you get the aches and pains, you get the joint pains and those kinds of things. That's normal. That is actually how you know that your body is responding to the vaccine the way it should. That is normal. But if you have COVID-19 and you have symptoms, and we don't know, remember the thing with COVID-19 is you could be one of those people who nothing happens to you, or you're asymptomatic, or you're fine. Or you could be one of those people who get really, really sick, really, really sick. And we don't really know which part of that spectrum you would fall. If we know you have COVID-19, and particularly if we know you have symptoms, it is not wise to give you the COVID-19 vaccine, because the vaccine can also bring on symptoms. And it does not make sense to give somebody who has the symptoms, who we don't know how bad their symptoms will be, something that would give them more symptoms. So what is recommended is that you wait a little bit, you wait a couple months, depending on the availability of vaccines, before you get vaccinated. But it's still recommended that you get vaccinated after a while, just to make sure that you get the maximum level of protection that is out there. So let me play this video really quickly, which talks specifically about efficacy. Yes, let me add it to the stream. Everybody's seeing. Oh, where is that video? Let me put it to play so that you all are hearing.
New one-dose COVID-19 vaccine from Johnson & Johnson. In early March, more than 6,000 doses were supposed to be shipped to the city of Detroit, Michigan.
Okay, so I paused it for a little bit just to ask, were you guys hearing the audio from that? Just let me know if you are hearing the audio from that video. Just type really quickly, yes, we're hearing, and I would continue, because I just want to make sure that everyone is hearing the audio from the video before I let it play for all of these minutes and then nobody hearing me. So type real quickly in the chat whether you're hearing the audio. Yes, you're hearing, so good. Let me allow it to play. Thank you all so much. Thank you. So let it continue play, and I promise I'm going to shut up. Last time I was doing one of these, I kept stopping and talking, and somebody said I'm confusing them. So I'm going to shut up and let you all hear the whole thing, and then we would talk about it.
But the mayor said no thanks.
Moderna and Pfizer are the best, and I am going to do everything I can to make sure the residents of the city of Detroit get the best.
He was referring to these numbers, the vaccine's efficacy rates. The vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna have super high efficacy rates, 95 and 94%. But Johnson & Johnson, just 66. And if you only look at these numbers, it's natural to think that these vaccines are worse than these. But that assumption is wrong. These numbers are arguably not even the most important measure of how effective these vaccines are. To understand what is, you first have to understand what vaccines are even supposed to do. A vaccine's efficacy rate is calculated in large clinical trials, when the vaccine is tested on tens of thousands of people. Those people are broken into two groups. Half get the vaccine and half get a placebo. Then they're sent out to live their lives while scientists monitor whether or not they get COVID-19 over several months. In the trial for Pfizer-BioNTech, for example, there were 43,000 participants. In the end, 170 people were infected with COVID-19. And how those people fall into each of these groups determines a vaccine's efficacy. If the 170 were evenly split, that would mean you're just as likely to get sick with the vaccine as without it. So it would have a 0% efficacy. If all 170 were in the placebo group and 0 people who got the vaccine were sick, the vaccine would have an efficacy of 100%. With this particular trial, there were 162 in the placebo group and just 8 in the vaccine group. It means those who had the vaccine were 95% less likely to get COVID-19. The vaccine had a 95% efficacy. Now, this doesn't mean if 100 people are vaccinated, 5 of them will get sick. Instead, that 95% number applies to the individual. So each vaccinated person is 95% less likely than a person without a vaccine to get sick each time they're exposed to COVID-19. And every vaccine's efficacy rate is calculated in the same way. But each vaccine's trial might be done in very different circumstances.
So one of the biggest considerations here when we look at these numbers is the timing in which these clinical trials were performed.
This is the number of daily COVID-19 cases in the US since the pandemic began. The Moderna trial was done completely in the US, here in the summer. The Pfizer-BioNTech trial was primarily based in the US too, and at the same time. Johnson & Johnson, however, held their US trial at this time when there were more opportunities for participants to be exposed to infections. And most of their trial took place in other countries, primarily South Africa and Brazil. And in these other countries, not only were case rates high, but the virus itself was different. The trials took place as variants of COVID-19 emerged and became dominant infections in these countries, variants that are more likely to get participants sick. In South Africa, most of the cases in the Johnson & Johnson trial were that of the variant, not the original strain that was in the US over the summer. And despite that, it still significantly reduced infections.
If you're trying to make one-to-one head-to-head comparisons between vaccines, they need to have been studied in the same trial with the same inclusion criteria in the same parts of the world at the same time.
If we were to take Pfizer and Moderna's vaccine and redo their clinical trial at the same time that we saw the J&J's clinical trial, we might see quite different efficacy numbers for those.
These efficacy numbers really just tell you what happened in each vaccine's trial, not exactly what will happen in the real world. But many experts argue this isn't even the best number to judge a vaccine by anyway, because preventing any infection at all is not always the point of a vaccine.
The goal of a vaccine program for COVID-19 is not necessarily to get to COVID-0, but it's to tame this virus, to defang it, to remove its ability to cause serious disease, hospitalization, and death.
It helps to look at the different outcomes of an exposure to COVID-19 like this. The best case scenario is you don't get sick at all. The worst case is death. In between, there's being hospitalized, severe to moderate symptoms, or having no symptoms at all. In the absolute best circumstances, vaccines give you protection all the way to here. But realistically, that isn't the main objective of COVID-19 vaccines. The real purpose is to give your body enough protection to cover these possibilities. So if you do get an infection, it feels more like a cold than something you'd be hospitalized for. And this is one thing that every one of these COVID-19 vaccines do well. In all these trials, while some people in the placebo groups were hospitalized or even died from COVID-19, not one fully vaccinated person in any of these trials was hospitalized or died from COVID-19.
One thing that I wish that Mary would have understood was that all 3 vaccines have essentially 100% effectiveness in protecting from death.
The mayor of Detroit did backtrack and said he'd start taking Johnson & Johnson doses because it's still highly effective against what we care about most. Efficacy matters, but it doesn't matter the most. The question isn't which vaccine will protect you from any COVID infection, but which one will keep you alive or out of the hospital? Which one will help end the pandemic? And that's any of them.
The best vaccine right now for you is the one that you're offered.
With each shot that goes in someone's arm, we get closer to the end of this pandemic.
So we see why the idea of efficacy is not necessarily the best the best way of judging, because as you could see, some of the vaccines were actually tested in their clinical trials early up in the infection when we did not have the variants. Some were tested in the United States in places that did not have very high cases at the time, while others were tested in other areas in other countries where they had high cases and where they had high variants or numbers of variants and so forth. Let me just say really quickly that all of the vaccines that we have right now, and I say all because I say all of the vaccines, including the Cuban vaccines, have gone through what is known and have what is known as emergency use authorization. Emergency use authorization. And let me explain really, really quickly what emergency use authorization is. Vaccines, medicines generally, all medicines have to go through different stages. The first stage has to do with the pharmaceutical company actually creating the medicine, creating the vaccine, going in the lab and putting the chemicals together and that kind of stuff. And then it goes into what is known as clinical trials. Clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, some go on to phase 4 and so forth. In phase 1 of the clinical trials, they usually test maybe 20, 30, no more than 50 people in the phase 1 of the clinical trial. One, to make sure that whatever it is they're giving you is not killing you. And they're doing it with a little bit of people for exactly that reason. They just want to make sure you're not dying from it. Mind you, to get to human clinical trials, they also had to have done tests on animals before. So just put that in there. Once you go through phase 1 and they realize it is not causing any undue harm, it is actually doing what we think it should do, then they get to phase 2 clinical trials. In phase 2 of the clinical trials, they usually then have hundreds of people where they are looking again to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. So this is where you have the control group versus the experimental group. So you're making sure the vaccine is actually doing what it should do. You're making sure that it is the side effects are not horrible, making sure that you don't get any unforeseen things, making sure that it's actually working the way it should. And then you go on to what is known as phase 3 clinical trials. And with phase 3 clinical trials, you now have thousands and thousands and thousands of people. As you saw in that clip, they were talking about 30 something thousand people in the clinical trials for Pfizer and those things. Now, phase 3 is where you can, where the difference between regular authorization, regular approval takes place, and emergency authorization. Normally, when there is no emergency, when there is no pandemic, when there is no, oh my God, this thing is killing all of us happening, pharmaceutical companies have to go all the way to the end of phase 3 before they can start manufacturing the drugs, whatever the drugs are, before they can start manufacturing the drugs. So you have to do phase 1, phase 2, and complete phase 3. Send your data to the FDA if you're in the United States. Send your data to the EMA if you are in Europe. Send your data to whoever is a Chinese regulatory body. Send your data to whoever is the Cuban or Russian regulatory body. The process is usually the same in the different countries before you can even start manufacturing the drug or the vaccine. If you are applying for emergency use authorization, though, it means that once you get to phase 1 and phase 2, and once they've begun getting the data from phase 3, so you have 1, 2, up to even 3 months of data from phase 3, and we are realizing that, what we saw in phase 1 and 2 is not really different to what we are seeing in phase 3, then the FDA or the EMA or whoever says to the company, you can go ahead now and start manufacturing your drug, manufacturing your vaccine, manufacturing what it is, so that by the time we give you approval, you already have the product manufactured and ready for distribution. That is why you recognize that for all of these, we were watching it as it happened. Pfizer, for example, when we saw that Pfizer got emergency use authorization, by the next day there was Pfizer vaccines ready to be distributed because they had already gone through the process of manufacturing. And it was a risk. It's a risky thing because you can manufacture and then something happens and it says, oh no, you can't use those anymore, even though you manufactured them, because because, they found out something within the first couple months of phase 3. Granted, phase 3, to get to phase 3, you had to have gone through phase 1 successfully, phase 2 successfully, and go through phase 3, the beginning of phase 3. It's also important to note that the Food and Drug Administration, which is a US-based regulatory organization, they approve US-based companies. One of their requirements is that you have to do some of your clinical trials in the United States. So if you have a company that is not a US-based company, if you have a company that did not do your clinical trials in the United States, you are not going to get FDA approval. You are going to get approval in wherever you did your clinical trials. And that is what is happening. That is what happened with AstraZeneca, for example. AstraZeneca is an Oxford, is a UK, European, EU company, and therefore they went through the European Medical Agency, or Medicines Agency is what EMA stands for, and they went through their process in the European Union. So they are now going through the process of getting approval in the United States so that they could use AstraZeneca in the United States. But they went through the same process that Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson went through in America. Oxford AstraZeneca went through that same process in the European area. Sinopharm went through that same process in China. Sputnik went through that same process in Russia. So it's not that the FDA is responsible for approving all the world's drugs. The FDA is only responsible for approving the drugs that go through the United States. I'm seeing Margareta asking, why are some countries refusing to accept all the WHO approved vaccines? Each country has their own rules. Now, you also have to remember, that even though this is a medical issue, and let me just say one more quick thing about WHO approved vaccines. The WHO does not go in and test vaccines themselves. So when we say you have a WHO approved vaccine, what we have is the company for that vaccine, that company, whatever company it is, when they were done doing their trials and whatever, took their data, says, here, WHO, here is the data for our trials. Here is the data for our vaccines. We want you to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Yes, the FDA went through it. Yes, the EMA went through it. Yes, they went through it. But we want you to also go through it with a fine-tooth comb and give your approval. So the WHO would then go through it with a fine-tooth comb and say, yes, it meets all of our standards, whatever those standards are. The one thing that's important to note, though, is that the WHO does not approach any company to do that approval. The company has to approach the WHO. So if Russia does not approach the WHO to have Sputnik approved, Sputnik will not get WHO approval. If Cuba does not approach the WHO to get their vaccines approved, Cuban vaccines will not get WHO approval. That does not mean that the vaccines are not good. That does not mean that the vaccines are not safe. It just means that those companies did not approach WHO. Why are some countries not using WHO approval? You also have to remember that we are in the middle, yes, even though we are in the middle of a health crisis and we're all thinking about this as normal, rational human beings who think about health, there's also a very large economic issue happening here. And there's also a very large East versus West thing that is happening. So we all know that there is this huge war, economic war, that's happening between the United States and China. We know that. Therefore, it makes sense economically for the United States to say, hey, hold up. We are not going to just have those Chinese vaccines. Yes, we know they're probably good. We know they're probably as good as ours. But remember, there is still an economic war happening between these countries that we, the rest of us, have to be very, very conscious about and understand that this isn't just about safety and effectiveness or efficacy or anything like that. There's also that economic battle that is happening between these large world powers that we still need to be very, very, very conscious of. And we have to remember to not get thrown up. It's also important to note that in all of the countries that I have seen where they speak about vaccinated and approved vaccines versus unvaccinated and unapproved vaccines, in all of those countries, none of those countries are saying that if you are vaccinated with an unapproved vaccine, you cannot come into the country. That's one thing you have to be conscious of. None of those countries are saying we will not accept you if you do not have a vaccine from this list. What they are saying is that if you come in with a vaccine from these vaccines that are approved, then you can come in, show your negative COVID-19 test, and go about your life normally. But if you do not have a vaccine from one of those approved lists, then when you come into the country, you still have to go through our quarantining process. So it's important to know that there's that little thing, there's a quarantine process. So it's not like the countries are saying you cannot come in. What the countries are saying is you can come in, but the rules when you come in are different for those on the approved vaccine list compared to the unapproved vaccine list. So it's important to note that. It's important to know that. So let me go quickly again to let you know about these. Let me look at these questions really quickly. Ricardo is asking, are you saying that natural immunity is not as effective as the vaccine immunity? And if so, how? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. And this is what happens normally. So this is not, by the way, I know we are talking about this as it relates to COVID-19, but just know that this is not just pertaining to COVID-19. This has been the case for all other vaccines that we've had to deal with. We've just, as a world, have not cared before now. The COVID-19 vaccines were created specifically to identify a particular part of the virus known as a spike protein. That's a part of the virus that attaches to the to our cells and basically allows the virus to feed its genetic material into our cells and then cause it to multiply, blah, blah, blah. What they're recognizing is that when you develop natural immunity, you may actually develop immunity to another part of the virus. So if that virus mutates and that other part changes, the immunity that you have developed is not going to work against the virus because it changes. What we've recognized so far is that the vaccines, the part of the virus known as the spike protein, does not change enough or has not changed enough to make the vaccines now ineffective because the virus has mutated. But most times, when you get natural immunity, you are getting immunity. Some of us may get immunity from the spike protein. Some of us may get immunity from other parts of the skin. Some of us may get immunity from other parts of the virus. And because those other parts change so quickly and they are mutating so quickly, it's just hard for your body to keep up with it. So when you get the vaccine is very specific, and the thing that the vaccine is very specific for, which is a spike protein, has not been changing as quickly or as the variation has not been as wide to cause the vaccines not to work, while what we are seeing is that the variations are wide enough for other things. So we are seeing that there are some people, for example, who may have gotten COVID, may have gotten antibodies, may have gotten their natural immunity, but when a new variation come in, they pick it up again because the part of the virus that they got immunity against was a part that actually changed, mutated. So the body is not recognizing that as the same thing that it fought off a month, 2 months ago. So I hope that answered your question. Shirley's asking, are there incidents of adverse reactions if they differ among the vaccine? If so, which is the least? So the vaccines, they all have different incidents. They all have different side effects. They all have different thing. Some of them change for different categories of people. You know, the Oxford AstraZeneca and the Johnson and Johnson were the same kind of vaccine, so they were the ones where we are talking about the blood clots, even though we know that the probability of blood clots are so low that is really not something to be worried about. And it's actually manageable. Once we know it's there, you can actually treat the blood clots, because we treat blood clots all the time. We treat blood clots all the time. We are recognizing now that I think the Pfizer and the Moderna are causing what is known as inflammation of the heart. The muscles are kind of inflamed in younger people, and again, it is not something that is not treatable. It's something that inflammation of the heart is something that happens. I don't want to say normally, but it is a normal side effect to lots of different kinds of medicines. And once you identify that that is what is happening, it can be treated. You just need to know that that is what's going on and then treat with it. So the bottom line is, there is no one vaccine that I would say has less side effects than any other vaccine. No, I would not try to rank it. I would not try to rank it like that. Why is it not seen as important to get COVID-19 antibody testing? It is important. It's very important. It's important. I think we need to get antibody testing so that we know how much antibodies each person has. But, I unfortunately, I am not a policy maker. So I don't know. I don't know. So, one other question. Hi, Kia. Question for the countries that are refusing entry who took certain, can those persons take another brand of vaccines? Yes, you can take another brand of vaccine if it's available to you, but it's not necessary, because remember, the only thing is not like the country is not letting you in. It is what you do when you get into the country. So you need to go on in quarantine, is what the various countries are saying. So it's not like they're not letting you in. It's not like they're not letting you in. And by the way, we would soon recognize that the more people get vaccinated with whatever vaccine is available, the more people, the more different countries open up and that kind of thing. These rules are not going to matter in a very short order. So in a couple months, Canada will not care whether you got a Chinese vaccine, a Russian vaccine, or an American vaccine. In a couple months, mark my words, in a couple months, once everybody starts opening up and movement starts to be, and the virus is actually managed, none of these countries are going to care in a couple months which vaccines you get. So don't even worry about. That is not something that I would be worried about. I would be worried about not getting a vaccine. That is what I would be concerned about, not getting one. So okay. The Cuban vaccine. So as I said, there are 5 Cuban vaccines. The thing about the Cuban vaccines is that they are all, my hair is kind of hot. They are all protein vaccines. So that's the thing about the Cuban vaccines. They are all protein vaccines. There are 5 of them. They are 3 are versions of what is known as a subburner. Oh no, I'm sure I'm not saying that right. Let me find the right word. Y'all know that I don't even, if I don't know, I don't know. I'm not one of those who get offended when I don't know. I am going to read from this document because, hey, the Subburana, Soberana, Subburana. So that's one of the categories. By the way, there are 3 different kinds of Subburana vaccines, right? So when we say Cuba has 5 vaccines, 3 of them are Subburana vaccines, and then we have the 2 others, which I'll talk about. The Subburana vaccines were produced by Finley Institute in partnership with the Center for Molecular Immunology and the National Biopreparations Center. The name Subburana means a sovereign, reflecting their economic and political importance for the island. Without this domestic production, Cuba would struggle to access foreign vaccines, either because of their cost in the international market or because of the long-standing U.S. embargo. We all know that, Cuba has been cut off from the United States and from many other countries, mainly the U.S. These vaccines work by inserting genetic information into superior mammalian cells. The Subburna Plus is the first vaccine for convalescent COVID-19 patients to reach the clinical trial stage. By the way, let me also say that let me also say very quickly that the same way how all of the other vaccines, or how all of the other vaccines have only gotten emergency authorization approval, these Cuban vaccines are exactly the same. They only have emergency authorization approval. But as I said, they have that does not mean they have not gone through a vigorous process. It just means that they have not waited until the end of phase 3 clinical trials to be over before they start mass producing. Again, because when they were going through it, they saw so much, so much progress, or they saw that it was working so well that it did not, and the people were dying so badly that it did not make sense to wait until the end of the clinical trials to then start manufacturing, right? So the Cuban vaccines are also have also emergency authorization. So that's a Saberna. So again, it has the not Saberna, no? Saberana. It has the Soberano 1, the Soberano 2, and the Soberano Plus. Again, different strengths based on how sick, it is, based on how the individuals who are taking it, the different categories of that. The thing about these Cuban vaccines is that it's kind of hard to find a lot of information about them. They're very secretive. They're very, very secretive, or maybe all of the information is in Spanish and I don't know how to read Spanish. Maybe. The other two vaccines that are from Cuba, one is known as the Abdala, 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 and the other one is known as Mambisa. Both of those were produced by the Center for Genetic Engineering. Abdallah is named for a poem by a national hero. Mambisa is named for a soldier who fought against Spanish. I guess they are very, very keen on how they name their vaccines. These vaccines insert genetic material into less evolved unicellular microorganisms. Remember, I said if you are allergic to yeast, for example, you shouldn't use these vaccines because these vaccines insert the protein information into a yeast. Yeast, well, not exactly the thing that we just bake with, but those kinds of microorganisms. Insert them into those, and that is what they put into you. It's important to note that the Abdala is taken as an injection. The Saburana is taken as an injection, but the Mambisa, which is still, I'm not sure that this is on the market just yet. The Mambisa is actually inhaled. So they squirt it into your nose, into your nostril, and that gets into your system. So you don't have to take an injection. You don't have to take an injection to get the Mambisa. You could thing it into your nose like a nasal spray into your nose to get you vaccinated. So for those of you who may be afraid of needles, this may be an option if and when it is available in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know when it will be available. I don't know whether the government is, already making deals with Cuba to get these vaccines. I don't know. And the government has a way of buffing you when you ask certain questions. So I really don't know. I really don't know. So let me see if I have any other questions. So again, those were the 5 COVID-19 vaccines from Cuba, Sabarana, the Abdallah, and the Mamdisa, and they are not available in Trinidad and Tobago right now, I don't think. I don't know when they will actually be available in Trinidad and Tobago. No clue. They use protein. They use the protein, so they pull the protein information, the spike protein information from the COVID-19 virus, put that in either a yeast or another medium, and then they put that inside of you. So it's just another mechanism for getting vaccines. Again, the 5 methods for the way vaccines work, the only one that is new, and when we say new, we mean, within the last couple of years, is the mRNA vaccine. All of the other technologies are the technologies that we've been using for vaccines for the last umpteen years. I mean, we've all, which side is it? We've all gotten vaccines, using those other methods. So they're not new. They're not new. The only thing that is new is that it is made for COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2, which is a virus that causes COVID-19. And the good thing about us having advanced technology, why is it whenever I'm on this thing, these flies just come passing in front of the screen? Embarrassing, I was on TV on Friday and there was a fly passing in front right through. I don't even, anyway. The only thing that is new is that it is a vaccine for this specific virus. But I also want to plug in really quickly. Remember, this virus did not just appear in 2019. This virus has actually been around. Well, not this version of the virus, but the coronaviruses have actually been around for years. If you go and search SARS, 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 you remember there was a whole point where we were not allowing Chinese planes to come and land because they were bringing SARS. Or another time right after that, there was MERS, MERC. SARS and MERS are actually diseases that you get from coronaviruses. And this coronavirus is just another version of the coronaviruses. So the world has actually been studying coronaviruses for some time. And because we have advancements in technology, meaning we now have equipment that can do genetic coding real quickly. Remember when for you to get a genetic coding for something, it was months and months and years of work. Now there are genetic machines that provide that information in a short space of time. And that is the information that, the people who make the vaccines needed. And that information was acquired very quickly, relatively quickly. So those people who then make vaccines could say, okay, well, let's just use this, thing. It's like, you're making, how to make chicken pilau. Yeah, you kind of know how to make beef pilau because you've been making chicken pilau. You just kind of change the meat a little bit. You may have to pressure cook the beef a little bit before you throw it in the rice, but you know to make pilau. People have been making vaccines. We've been living with vaccines. So it's just a matter of getting the right information about this specific virus so that we make a vaccine for it. The good thing is that they've now been saying that because of all of these new technologies, and particularly the mRNA technology, they are now re-evaluating getting vaccines for HIV because they've never been able to get vaccines for HIV because the HIV mutates so much. It mutates so much so quickly. They've never been able to get a vaccine for HIV, but they're now saying now that they have that mRNA technology, they're going back and looking now at the possibility of getting a vaccine for HIV using the mRNA technology. Listen, we are in amazing times. We are in amazing times. I know that the last year and a half has been horrible for most of us. I mean, unless you're Bill Gates and that other one who owns Amazon and those people who seem to become billionaires while the rest of us could barely eat. It's been hard and it's been frightening. But the reality is, when you look back at the history of HIV, for example, when HIV just came on the scene, a lot of the angst and a lot of the questions and a lot of the theories that we had about HIV back then, it's really repeating itself now with COVID-19. We are now 40 years into HIV. 40 years into HIV, and we look back now and we kind of laugh and joke at how silly we were at the beginning of the infection. And I think the same thing is going to happen. The same thing is going to happen as it relates to COVID. 10 years from now, we're going to look back and think, oh God, look how stupid we were. Look how stupid we were about this thing in the earlies when we were doing this or not understanding that, but we now understand it because of technology. All right, so let me go through these questions again just to make sure I haven't missed any critical question. If you have another question, let me know, please. I will try to answer your question as well as I could. Yes, I've answered all of those before. Let me just go through. If you have any other question, let me see. Ariel, you have a long thing. Oh, it came up. Let me see. It pains me that you must bear the burden of public education revaccination when there are people whose mandate it is and who's paid to do so. The government's approach has been to use the fear of death as its primary tool, and we have seen that this is the least effective method. I hope that people are looking at their alternatives. Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you. I'm a health educator. This is why I went to school to learn how to explain things. I see this as my job. And I think the little thing about me is that I was educated. The Tobago House of Assembly paid for my undergrad education. I was one of those that Mr. Hochoy Charles sent way to school to study. So even though I am not officially paid as a health educator, I see this as part of my responsibility because Tobago educated me. So I don't have a problem doing this at all, at all, at all. And I actually enjoy doing it. So it says here I've basically answered my questions. Shirley is saying, so true. In a few months, this traffic light system, like the bubble system, won't matter. Exactly. In a few months, it won't. It will not matter in a little bit. And we will all go back to normal. And I cannot wait. I need, listen, just before so I have to thank God that I missed it. I was not one of those on a cruise ship when COVID started and was stuck out there. I went on my first cruise in 2019, December 2019, just before this madness started happening. And I loved it. And I vowed to myself that I would find myself on a cruise every single year for the rest of my life, as long as I could afford it. And then COVID happened, and I'm like, oh God. So yes, I need you all. Listen, I need you all to go take the vaccines. I need you all to take care of yourself, wash your hands, wear your masks, keep your distance, that kind of thing, because that is what it will take for us to open back up. Please, 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 that is what it will take for us to open back up. So anyway, I am going to jump off now. It is now 3:30, or very close to 3:30. Just a quick announcement. If you're listening to me, it means that you're online. It means that you are already sitting in front of your computer or your phone. It means that you have a little bit of time at 4 o'clock. My brother, Fali Chavez Augustin, is going to be on Channel 5. Look at the Tobago Channel 5 Facebook page. It should stream live on Tobago Channel 5, or if you have Channel 5 home, put on your TV. Mr. Fali Chavez Augustin is going to be on talking about the Tobago Autonomy Bill. He is going to be joined, well, my understanding is that it should have been a panel of stakeholders, all political parties. But somehow, in the middle of all the hoorah, only Mr. Hochoy Charles and Mr. Farley Chavez Augustine ended up being on the show, and they decided to continue. Anyway, the members of the other party, the other red party, yeah, they decided that they are not going to attend. So, it is what it is. We already know their agenda. So anyway, this live is not for that. Anyway, guys, so thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you thought this information was useful, please consider sharing it either publicly. So just hit the share button and post it on your page. If you think that it is worth it, please share it. Click the copy link and then share it to other people who might be interested in looking at this, because we need as many people as possible to know the information. If you have questions that I have not answered here, you could shoot me a message. I will try to answer them. I'll probably do another live if it is absolutely necessary to do another live about this issue, and we go from there. Again, thank you guys so much. Thank you. By the way, there is a way to get this. Is on my professional page, Dr. Faith B.Yisrael, Assemblyman page. If you like and follow that page, I think there's also an option for you to see post first. So if you play around with it, you would see a little thing that says see post first, which means as soon as I post something or as soon as I go live, you would know that I've gone live. Please consider clicking on that little option so that you would see when I am here giving this kind of information. All right, guys. So thank you, Rhonda, for coming in and for commenting. Thank you all so much. Had a blessed day. And all of you, we celebrated Pride yesterday. As you see, I have my nice little Pride flag. Happy Pride, because, hey, we all should want to live in a world where every human being is treated with love, decency, and respect, where all human rights are relating to every single person. So guys, thank you so much. Have a blessed Sunday. Tune in at 4 p.m. for that Tobago Channel 5 show with Assemblyman Fali Chavez Augustine. Thank you. Have a blessed day. Enjoy your weekend and stay safe.